Good morning, family and friends. This is Sandra Brown of Life Past 80. And this is a Sunday. And we just got back from eating out. And we tried a restaurant that I had heard has really good avocado toast. Bill hates avocado. And so this is a good opportunity for me to go to get it. It was so good. Really, really good. On sourdough bread with an egg on the side. Very nice. So anyways, we're home now, and Mr. Bill's in there in the office working on his book. And I thought I'd just do a little YouTube here today. And I hope I don't have my camera kind of backwards. I don't know. Still working on it. Okay. So next month is Father's Day. It'll be Father's Day next month. And I began thinking about my own little father and how I was blessed by having him as my father, how that all happened. You know, God has plans in our lives sometimes. If we look back at how that all worked out, and I can't really tell you everything because I don't want to, hurt anybody's stuff, but it's just a wonder I'm even here. Put it that way. God had his hand on me for sure. And so I want to tell you a little bit about my mother's life. She was brought up during the Depression. And at that time, you probably heard your parents talk about it. At that time, they were actually felt fortunate or blessed to have a roof over your head and a meal. And I know my grandmother, I remember she could just make a meal out of nothing, they said. And I guess the county or something, you'd go there once, I don't know how often, and I remember the things they would give you is a block of cheese, I think, and I know potatoes. They got sick of potatoes. But they said Grandma could think of more ways of working with those potatoes and making a meal out of it. If it was gravy and potatoes or whatever else, but she could do it. But the kids, there were several children in the family, my mother's family, and they all, as they were, older, not little kids, they all kind of went in different directions. Just, like I said, to get a roof over their head, maybe to work for somebody. But I remember Mom saying there were different people she would stay with, and she tried to do a little work for them, and maybe then the husband would start chasing her around or something, and she'd have to leave or whatever. But I don't know the whole story there. I remember her talking about the dances they used to go to. I don't know what they were called. It was a marathon dance or something? But she would go to them because they would feed you. They had sandwiches. During the Depression, you were lucky to get a sandwich. But you would go there, and I think that there would be some kind of a prize you would get if you could stay on the floor the longest, if you could dance the longest. And it would be more than hours. I believe sometime maybe 2 or 3 days. Yeah, without their sleeping. But like one of them would just be hanging on the other one, getting a few winks while the other one was almost holding them up. And they would do that for a prize and a sandwich. Because I remember her saying that they did that. But somewhere in there, and I'm just telling you things that I'm putting together with a little bit of my sister's help, of things that she told me that I wasn't a darn bit interested in when I was young. You know how it is. I know you've heard that story before. Now I would like to hear more about it and be able to write everything down. But I do remember a lot that she told me. One of the things, I know she ended up marrying a man by the name of Eugene. It was her first marriage. I gotta put my glasses on because I did have to put a couple notes down. And she called him Tone, Tone, when she referred to him. And they had, I remember, I'm just putting together things she said, so I can't tell it as a story because I want to tell the truth. But that she remembers living in an apartment and he would be at work, and she was happy to be with Tone because Tone had a good job on the railroad. I don't know what he did, but he had a good job on the railroad, which people were lucky to have a job during that time. And so she was home all day, and I believe it was in August, and she said she was real big pregnant, she was hot, and she just wanted to get out and just go to the drugstore and get I think a Coke or something was a big deal. And he did not want her to leave the house. Being pregnant was almost I don't know, a very private, embarrassing thing. Not like now where the girls have their stomach sticking out a hole with an arrow pointing down. Life has changed, yeah. So she said she would put on, maybe in the summer, but she put on a coat, a long coat, just to go down to the drugstore, to get a Coke or something. And that he would really be upset with her when he come back and found out that she had been down there. So let's see, what else? Okay, so she was pregnant, as I say, for my oldest brother. And she named him Melvin Jean. He hated that name. He just hated the sound of it. But they nicknamed him Corky after an old comic strip, which you'd probably be able to find if you look it up on YouTube. But it was just some ornery little kid, and they named him Corky. And that's all I've ever known him by is Corky. And I remember, I know this is funny, but I'm just telling you what I remember her saying. I remember her saying that the birth was a long time having him. And she said, so when he was born, that his head was pointed. And my mom was all for looks, how a baby looked, okay. And so I know her and Grandma would oil his head and try to rub his little head down, which it did straighten out. He had a nice head, but, So they had a family reunion. I don't want to give the last names because I guess it doesn't matter, but they had a family reunion for her husband's side. And everybody wanted to see the baby. And somebody had bought her a beautiful white lace bonnet. And Mom said, oh, he looked like a monkey in it. I don't know. It's just my mom, okay? As I said, she was really into how people looked. And so she said she left him in the car. Now, my mom was a really good mother with babies, so I don't know what that meant, but she didn't want to bring him for the people at the but the family reunion to see him. So, but he was safe. I don't know. But anyways, and they're all going, oh, where's the baby? Where's the baby? They wanted to see him. And Mom would go, oh, he's sleeping or something. But eventually she had to go get him out. Of course, they made over him. And then as he got a little older, he was an adorable little toddler. Very, very cute. And in fact, people would stop on the street and say, oh, how cute he was, And he was, he tanned real nice and had big brown eyes. And she said he used to wear little white cowboy boots or something. I just remember her talking about that. Okay, so his father, which was, as I said, they called Tone, he had epilepsy. Now, at that period of time, they didn't have anything to control the epilepsy. They may have some, but maybe they couldn't control completely. I don't know. But she said he would come home from work sometime, and his the back of his, he was a very neat man, very clean and neat, but he would come home and the back of his shirt would be full of grass sometimes, where he had fell in the grass and just had a seizure. So that had to be pretty sad, you know. And I know at the table, she said that we'd be sitting at the table and he would just start going, kind of like that. And then he'd have to get up and he'd go into the bathroom and lock the door. So you couldn't check on him or nothing. He didn't want anybody in there. He would have a seizure, clean himself up and come out. Poor guy, you know. But so one day he had, I think she said they counted 40 seizures. This is what she told me. And that he passed away from it. He was 39 years old. And Corky, my brother, was only 18 months old. So he lost his father at a young age. All right, so I don't make sure I'm not missing anything. But I got to interject something here. At my mother's homestead where she was raised, there was a little boy. Well, he's about almost 5 years younger than my mother. But his name was Walter, or Wally, but they all called him Sparky. He was a little guy. He always had a harmonica in his back pocket, and she called it a little skull cap, whatever that is. And he kind of had a bit of a bad eye, too, you know. Honored little kid, always on his own, came from his mother died when he was very young. She was only 32 years old. And he was a middle child and basically raised by his sister, who was a little bit older than him. The father just didn't work half the times. They were very poor. He would be in school, in grade school at times, and he would get in trouble on purpose to be sent to the cloakroom because you had to go stand in the cloakroom. He wanted to go in there because some of the other kids came from families where they had really good lunches in there, and he would steal a sandwich out of the bag so he'd have something to eat. And I do remember him talking about the neighbors giving him a cold biscuit with some jelly on it or something like that, and he was happy to get that. So he was raised rough. So he liked being at my grandma's house, which is my mother's mother. And my mother now, of course, while her first husband was living, they felt sorry for my dad, and they liked him. He was a little guy, and they even talked about adopting him. And now, of course, Eugene, or Tone, has passed away, and she has a little boy. And, you know, in those days, there was no careers or really a way of making a living or anything like that. Now, I'm not sure how she met her next husband, but it could have been at one of those dances, possibly. I wish I knew. But he was, well, her first husband was a very nice looking man. Her second husband, now I would get confused because the first one was Eugene, and she called him Tone, but her second husband was Gene. So Eugene and Gene. But Gene was a tall, 6'5" maybe, dark skin, black hair, green eyes. He was part Indian, and he was from Oklahoma. And she met him, and I know at one time they went to Oklahoma to his parents, and this might have been when it happened, really went sour between them. You know, I don't want to be talking about people. I don't know. I wasn't there. Okay, just saying what she said, that he wasn't good to Corky, the child, whose daddy died, wasn't good to him. And she had a child now by Gene, my brother Neil. And he grew to be a 6'4" or 5", but with blonde hair. And so she had Neil and Corky when at this particular visit, when things went bad. And all I know is something about cork issues, or I don't know, giving him a bath or something. And I won't go into that. That he was crying, and I guess Jane wasn't. He was lost patience, put it that way. But anyways, he was rough on her too. So it ended up, she took both of the boys and got on a bus and decided to go back home to Cedar Lake, Indiana, where her parents lived. But she had no money. I guess enough for the bus fare. And Neil was on a bottle. He was little yet. And she was very proud. It's not going to take anything from anyone. But a young man on the bus, he was in the service, and he noticed that my mother had never got out when they'd stopped the bus for food, and everybody get out, and Mom didn't. And he noticed it, and he said he offered, to buy her something to eat, and she wouldn't take it. And finally, Neil was crying, and she said she would, if he would just buy a container of milk for Neil and to put in his bottle. And she did take that and made it back to Cedar Lake, Indiana. Okay, so now she's in Cedar Lake, Indiana, and she has 2 little boys now. And somewhere in there, she must have filed for a divorce, because she divorced Jean. And in the meantime, while she was gone and whatever else was happening in her life, Sparky, Wally, he had grown up. Still a little guy, but he grew up to be really cute. And he loved my mother. He dearly loved my mother. And he wanted to marry her, and he wanted to take care of the boys. And I think, from what I understand, she did fall in love with him. And he loved her mother. His mother-in-law was already close to her. And so it just all worked out real good. And they married. He was wonderful to the boys, to my brothers. And then she became pregnant by Wally. And they had a little boy. And his name was, I get it right here. I wrote it down. Oh, they named him Walter Daniel. I'll leave the last names out. Oh, Brown, because you know my maiden name. Okay, Walter Daniel Brown. He was born in 1941. She married my dad in 1940. And she said that the baby was premature. He was adorable little baby. He had auburn curly hair, blue eyes, little dimples in his cheeks. He cried, though, a lot. And she sometimes couldn't console him, but my grandma, her mom, I guess she lived next door or something, she'd come around, and she had on this big old apron and a red cap of some kind she wore. And she would come over and rock that baby, and she's about the only one that could get him consoled. But when he was 5 months old, he got pneumonia, and they had to end up putting him in the hospital. Well, they didn't have penicillin at that time. And she said they would go on the elevator up on the 2nd floor of the hospital to see him, and that she could hear him before they ever got to the room. We could hear him breathing. He was laboring to breathe. And they lost him. And it was a very cold winter at this time, very, very cold. And my father went out and bought him his first pair of baby shoes to bury him in. And I remember her always talking about how cold it was outside, and she just hated to put that baby in that cold ground. But then, of course, she was having a very rough time about losing that baby and didn't want any more. Well, she wanted a girl with every baby. She had 3 boys. But she was grieving over him. And then at night, she kept thinking she could hear the baby crying at night. And so my dad decided to move her. So they didn't own that home anyhow. So, but Dad moved her. And then she became pregnant for me. I wish I could tell you that whole story, but I can't. But anyway, she became pregnant for me. And she was not wanting me, I'll put it that way, because she was not over the baby and didn't want to go through all that again if something would happen, I suppose. But she finally, as her pregnancy went along, was getting used to the idea. And she just, in her head, she told her mother, she goes, I know I'm going to have a girl. And she went down and she bought a little pink coat and bonnet. And her mom said to her, you're going to feel real funny if we have another boy with that pink bonnet and stuff. Nope, she says, I know I'm going to have a girl. And so Christmas Eve in Cedar Lake, Indiana, they had friends over and she went into labor. The doctors came to the house at that time, and he came to the house and delivered me. It was me. So I was born on Christmas Day, and I looked just like she wanted me to, but it all changed. I had black curly hair and blue eyes, but all babies are born with blue eyes. But anyways, it all worked out, and she was very happy. And then almost 15 years later, 14 years, 14 years later, my sister, Debbie, was born. And of course, I was at the age I just discovered boys, so I was a built-in babysitter. So her and I didn't get along real good at that time. But then as we got older, by the time she was maybe 13, I started taking her to church with me, and we've been very close ever since. Yes, very close. I've just often thought I don't know what I'd do if anything happened to Debbie. We were very close. But I just wanted to say what a good dad my father was. I can remember him teaching me to dance by standing on his feet. And when my late husband passed away, a friend of mine, I know maybe you don't believe in this, but the Lord shows her pictures of things. And one day she seen a picture of me. And she said, Sandy, I seen a picture of you standing on Jesus' feet, dancing. And I'm like, it meant nothing to her, but it did to me. I go, oh my goodness. That's what I used to do with my dad, and that really touched me. And my father was always there for my brothers and for me. He was always had a smile. He was generous. As soon as you walk in the door, he had that coffee pot on or trying to give you something to eat. You couldn't leave the house. He had to give you something. Find something to give you. And when I was young, and my sister remembers this too, on Valentine's Day, he would get mom candy and card, and then he would get a smaller box for her mother, because she lived with us. He called her Fanny, my dad did. And then he would get a small box of candy for us girls. He was just a very thoughtful, sweet man. And many times in my coat pocket, I'd reach into my coat pocket in the wintertime, and there'd be a bag of M&Ms in there. he would stick in there. So I'm just thankful for my dad and how it just turned out that he was my father after all these circumstances in my mother's life. And this video is getting a little long, so I better hurry up here and do my devotional today, okay? All right, and this is, once again, and I'll put a link, Jesus Listens Devotional, Prayers, Peace of Joy and Hope by Sarah Young. Glorious God, your word teaches that I am being transformed into your image from glory to glory. I find this verse both comforting and thrilling. I am grateful that your Spirit is orchestrating this massive work in me. When I face difficulties in my life, I don't want to waste those challenging circumstances. Instead, I can invite you to use them to transform me more and more into your likeness. This may be a painful process, but I know that your wisdom, ways, and will are perfect. I need to be willing to suffer with you, so I may also be glorified with you. Even though my troubles sometimes seem heavy and endless, I realize they're really just light and momentary compared to the eternal glory that they are achieving for me. I'm learning to thank you for my hard times and praise you for ongoing troubles, regardless of how I'm feeling. I want to glorify you by always giving thanks, even in the midst of adversity, because of who you are and all that you've done for me. Moreover, a thankful attitude helps me make progress in my transformation from glory to glory. In your beautiful name, Jesus, amen. And these are the 3 scriptures she has in the bottom. 2 Corinthians, but we all, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory. We're being daily transformed into the image of Christ. And sorry to say, but some of those hard times and trials that we go through transform us. Of course, we don't like hearing that, right? But it's a fact. And in Romans 8:17, if indeed we suffer with him, so we may also be glorified with him. 2 Corinthians, for our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. Oh, wow. It is going to be wonderful. Oh, it's going to be wonderful up there, folks. It really is. And Ephesians 5:19, sing to the Lord. Always give thanks to God the Father for everything. In the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Father, bless all my friends out there. Bless everybody that's watching this channel. Dear God, I don't know what their needs are. I don't know what they're going through. I know there's people out there just suffering through some things. Oh, caregivers. I've been there. I know how that feels. Kids that are maybe sick, or maybe finances, or children that are all not living like they should, or are angry or fighting, marriages that are bad, all these things, God. You know it's there. And Lord, help them to turn this whole thing over to you. I know you're going to work it out. You're going to work it out. It's not going to be forever. We thank you for that, God. God bless everybody out there. Love you guys. Thanks for being with me. Wow, I did a long one today. Okay, bye-bye now.